Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining my session. My name is Kristina Balaam, and today we're going to be talking about a multidisciplinary approach to threat intelligence. Before we get started, I just want to give a couple of plugs to some talks from my Lookout colleagues. Please stop by the Lookout booth from 12 till 1. There are going to be some discussions live there with some of my colleagues and kind of like the work that they're doing and how things kind of run at Lookout, which is really interesting. And then check out Lookout CMO Deb Wolf's session at 1 p.m. Deb has gathered together 5 executive women that are in cybersecurity, and they're going to discuss leadership in this male-dominated field. And her talk is called Cracking the Code, Women Leading Security Marketing in a Male-Dominated Field. And it's a really rare chance to get to hear these women share their experiences. So check that one out. And then another colleague, Sarita, is giving a talk on trends in cybersecurity at 2 p.m. A little bit of housekeeping. Feel free to interact during this talk. There's like emojis. You can interact with the poll, and feel free to leave questions in the chat. I'll try to answer them as we go, and if I don't get to them during the actual talk, I'll try to answer them at the end. Okay, so let's get started. Like I said, we're talking about a multidisciplinary approach to threat intelligence. I work as a senior staff security intelligence researcher at Lookout, which is a very fancy way of saying that I'm a threat intelligence researcher. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background, just because I think that that will become relevant for the discussion that we're having. Essentially, you know, why the work that we do in this industry, as well as like other disciplines outside of threat intelligence, basically most disciplines, from my understanding within cybersecurity, rely not just on technical skills and technical know-how, even if you're in a kind of more of like an engineering role, but also a lot of the skills and experiences that you've had in other areas of your life, whether that's, you know, studying humanities in your post-secondary education, or a passion for learning languages. A lot of this stuff can come back into play in the work that we're doing. So I did an undergrad degree in computer science and political science. I had a really keen interest in both. I was really interested when it came to political science in foreign policy and human rights issues. Thought I was going to become a lawyer, kind of focusing on human rights issues and like studying international law. Did not. Ended up in computer science, but it was a really keen area of interest for me, and so we'll see how this kind of like ties into the work that our team does. After I graduated, I became a web developer, moved to a generalist software engineer at a company called Shopify, and then transitioned to web application security and mobile application security, focusing primarily on Android, and then ended up at Lookout doing malware analysis and threat intelligence, where I am now. My interests really include languages. I love languages, human rights and humanitarian issues, like I said, foreign policy, like I said, and I really love research. So I'm telling you this not because it's like super fascinating stuff, but because we're talking about how other areas of our lives tie into our work, or how it can contribute to the work that you might end up doing if you're transitioning into a cybersecurity role. So throughout this talk, I really want you to think about yourself. Where are you now? Are you in a role that you want to stay in? Are you trying to transition into a cybersecurity role? Are you trying to move within disciplines within this industry? Presumably a lot of us attending Day of Security, either presently or in the past, have been interested in either getting into the industry or kind of like moving between roles in this industry. So I really want you to think about kind of like where you are and how your history and your other skills can contribute to the role that you're in, or to, you know, transitioning to somewhere else. What do you love? You know, what are your interests? Like the example I just gave. Where do you want to be? And what skills and knowledge do you have that can help you get there, or that can help bolster the work that you're already doing? So keep that in mind as we're talking about this. We're going to be using a case study that kind of illustrates how all of these different areas can contribute to the work that we do on the threat advisory services team, or the threat intelligence team in general, but we'll talk about it in a broader context as well. So why are we talking about this? Like I said, this is going to be very specific in terms of the case study to the threat intelligence work that I do, but it's really applicable to almost every discipline in cybersecurity. And I think it's important that we remember that the work that we do is not, it's not in a vacuum. If you are, say, in an engineering role, yes, there is going to be technical understanding that you're going to need to have, and you're going to have certain skills that are required for succeeding in that role. But at the same time, I would hazard to guess that there are a number of other skills and experiences. They may not be like, specifically technical, whether it's writing code in a certain language or understanding, a certain like web framework or something like that, that will also contribute to your work. And, this threat intelligence is certainly not the only discipline that this kind of multidisciplinary approach can be taken for. So I want you to kind of think about how it could apply to the work that you're doing if you're not in this industry as well, or this discipline within the industry, I should say. So a little bit of a disclaimer here. I'm talking about what threat intelligence looks like at Lookout. Different threat intel teams at different companies, public sector versus private sector, can kind of look a bit different. So when I'm talking about the work that we do on the threat advisory team, the TAS team, which is our threat intelligence reporting team at Lookout, it kind of looks like this. So we hunt for mobile threats. Sometimes those are novel threat actors that are mobile focused. Sometimes those are threat actors that have been reported previously, but they have been primarily associated with desktop or non-mobile campaigns. So we're looking for like a mobile angle to that threat. We will be analyzing the malware that we find. That kind of ties into the like what or how of the reporting that we do. What is this malware? How does it work? How does it compromise somebody? That kind of thing. We end up analyzing attacker infrastructure. Again, that sort of plays into the what and how, and we'll look at that in a second, how I've sort of divided this out into these questions. What is the infrastructure doing? How is it operating? What is the framework that's being used? What is the technology? And then we have to understand the adversary. So who are they? Why are they launching this campaign? Where are they based? Where are they targeting people? When was this happening? Is it still a relevant campaign? Is it outdated? Does it even, make sense to go down this rabbit hole? Because maybe it's not even an active campaign anymore, that kind of thing. And then we write reports about our findings based on our research. So there's supposed to be there we go. So we're going to be using a case study for this. And this case study is a mobile threat that was named Moonshine by researchers at Citizen Lab. This was a surveillance tool that was originally disclosed by them, and they had observed it targeting Tibetans through exploits that were delivered over WhatsApp. On our team, we discovered a mobile component. So instead of the surveillance tool being delivered through WhatsApp, like trying to compromise devices that way through like a link that you click that then installs this surveillance tool on your device, we were seeing it embedded in applications that were then being shared over social media. So when we're talking about Moonshine, we're talking about that application-based version of the threat. So a little bit of a TLDR about this particular threat. We know it's a Chinese threat actor. We had access to administrative web panels and command and control infrastructure. We observed this threat actor targeting primarily members of the Uyghur community and mobile device users, Android device users in the Uyghur community that were on various social media channels. And the last bullet here, this threat, this malware has been widely distributed through social media channels that are primarily used by members of the Uyghur community. So when people talk about work in cybersecurity, this is something that I've experienced a lot over the last 8 or 9 years or so. They really tend to focus on the technical work, like what languages do you know? What coding languages do you know? What technology are you working with? But this work is important. It's like I said, if you're in an engineering role, you need to understand how to do the engineering work, but it's not everything. And I think it's important that we kind of draw from all areas of our lives and all of our experiences to be more well-rounded in the roles that we're doing, even when they do tend to be in kind of one of these technical disciplines. So in our case, in threat intelligence, we really want to know how a threat or a threat actor operates. That's very important. We want to know that how. How are they doing this? How is the threat being distributed? How does it work? How does the infrastructure communicate with the malware that's on the person's device? How are they exfiltrating victim data from a device? All of that is very important, that how. But at the same time, the vast majority of intelligence consumers really want to know at least some of the 5 Ws. So who, what, where, when, and why. And having a good understanding of the technical aspects of the threat that you're analyzing is important for that how and for the, sometimes the what, but it typically can't really help you as much with the rest of those questions. And that's where the other skills come in. So I'll start off looking at the how. How do we understand what this threat is doing, how it works, how it's compromising devices, that kind of thing. This is where you see a lot more of those like technical skills. Reading code for us is a big one. So analyzing source code from samples that we've acquired, malware samples we've acquired, and then reverse engineered. For Android applications, that looks like Java and assembly language. For iOS applications, it's assembly. For desktop binaries, it's assembly. If we're looking at scripts that might exist on like a server that we have access to that maybe the threat actor has left open by accident, we are going to be reading code and trying to understand what that code does. And so that's important for explaining the like how a threat operates or how a threat actor operates. And then similarly to this, writing code is important for the kind of work that we're doing. Writing decryption scripts helps us better understand, say, like infrastructure that might be hard-coded into a sample, or logging messages that might be encrypted because they tell the threat actor something important, but the threat actor doesn't want to let us know what they're actually saying. That's very useful to have access to that. Building tools that help your analysis and your threat hunting initiatives. Most threat intel teams are pretty small, so the likelihood that you're going to be able to really rely on like manual analysis or manually hunting through, say, hundreds, sometimes thousands of different applications, it's not really realistic. So being able to build your own tooling is really important, as well as like scripting that can be required for some tools that you might be interacting with, like analysis tools. So one of them that we use quite frequently is called Frida. It's a dynamic instrumentation toolkit. Basically lets you like hook into functions and manipulate the app that you're analyzing real time. It's really helpful for like dumping encrypted stuff that you find in an application without having to like go through it all yourself, which would take forever. So that's great. Writing plugins for different analysis tools, also really important. So yes, these skills are valuable and they are important for the work that we do on our team and for like most areas of like engineering roles within our industry, right? Same thing, understanding web infrastructure. So this is an example of a panel that we had access to for the Moonshine threat. This is how administrators were able to log in to a web, like an admin panel, and view victim data that had been collected from the devices that were compromised. And so for us, this side of the story is very important. We tend to need to know how this infrastructure operates. Can we get at open directories? Do we understand how the APIs work and how they're communicating with the mobile device, and how they're exfiltrating that data? Again, this ties very strongly back into the like, how does the threat operate? And this tends to be, more of like a technical understanding of web infrastructure and web development. So that is very helpful. So we've talked about those like kind of well understood technical skills. I feel like anytime I talk about what I do, someone says that, oh, sorry, I just saw the slides. Okay, shoot. Sorry, folks. Okay, hopefully you can see the slides now. I'll share the slides as well after the talk over the Slack channel. Okay, good. So you can see them now. All right. So yeah, how does all of this stuff tie into the actual work that you're doing? If you're in an engineering role, these things are important to understand how to do. But there are other skills that are also, in my opinion, like I'd say equally important in a lot of ways, especially if you're going to be reporting to consumers of the intelligence that you're producing. So The first thing is typically tied to attribution. Attribution for us on our team looks like who did this stuff, who is responsible for the threat. You know, can we find personas for these people? Do we know their names? That doesn't happen as often, but can we figure out what company? Can we figure out what country? Can we figure out what government? These questions are important, and having answers to these can be very, very important for our customers. So the thing I'll say is that, like, anybody else here in threat intelligence, like, we all know this, attribution is really hard. It's really difficult to actually be able to say with high confidence that a particular individual or an organization is responsible for a threat. And sometimes you get the smoking gun. Like, we've had situations where we'll have command and control infrastructure at a particular IP address, and the threat actor will have a major OPSEC or operational security fail, and they'll have used that same IP address and that same server for like their company's commercial landing page at some point in the past, and like the timestamps line up, and you're like, oh, okay, this is developed by this private technology company. Okay, we're pretty confident that's the case, but that doesn't happen super frequently. So being able to understand the context for a threat actor and be able to determine like whether something makes sense, if you're kind of reaching a conclusion or a hypothesis about attribution, is really important. So the first thing is understanding the geopolitical context. In the case of Moonshine, we knew that we were seeing members of the Uyghur community being targeted by this malware. And so we were able to answer the who was being targeted, but who is responsible for the threat was a more challenging question. Now, if you don't understand the geopolitical context of why anybody would be targeting members of the Uyghur community, that can make it a lot harder to come to a conclusion about who the threat actor might be, as well as the why. So, we knew, based on an understanding of what was happening to Uyghurs within mainland China, that there was a lot of surveillance against this particular population. We saw a lot of targeting in Turkey, and so if you don't understand the relevance of that, then it can kind of look super random, right? Like, why are people in Turkey being targeted? However, there is a very large Uyghur diaspora in Turkey, so that kind of targeting makes sense again. It can also help you understand the precedent. So have we seen this threat actor targeting these groups of people before, or like, have there been other campaigns with threat actors that might fit into this particular pattern for the threat that we're analyzing? And that can kind of help you narrow down who might make sense in terms of the threat actor that we are trying to attribute this to. Languages. So especially in threat intelligence, and I think in a lot of other areas too, especially if you're doing anything that potentially requires translation, or like understanding intel that might be coming from other countries, or like if you're an English speaker, non-English speaking countries, understanding languages can be super, super important. So translation tools are great, but they fail. And sometimes there can be nuances to the language that Google Translate is not going to help you out with. So for example, here we have a technology company, a software company that is based in mainland China that has been tied to Chinese threat actors. And we see a reference to like safety in the translation of the work that they do. Now, safety is the translation that Google Translate gives you for a word that is typically used to mean security. And so if you don't necessarily understand the nuance in like how that word was translated, it can kind of seem like, oh, well, this isn't like safety software, this is security software, and you could kind of move along. So having an understanding there can be really important, and pulling from languages that, maybe you like learned growing up, or you just have an interest in languages, or you studied linguistics, or like, who knows, can really be helpful in the work that you're doing and help give you more context in the work that you're trying to complete. Research and open source intelligence. So for the work that we do, and again, many other areas of cybersecurity, being able to research things and use open source intelligence, or OSINT, can be very, very important, and in some cases crucial. For us, it is absolutely crucial. We uncovered a lot of the threats tied to the moonshine campaign through social media channels. We needed to investigate various personas, emails, phone numbers, different company names, coordinates from leaked exfil that might have been like a photo or something like that. Like, you need to be able to understand how to use a little bit of the data that you have and open source intelligence to be able to kind of put together the rest of the information and paint a clearer picture. And some of these skills are fully transferable from other roles. So, I've done OSINT courses where there have been people that were attending that worked at banks and they were involved in fraud investigations. So this certainly isn't like only a threat intelligence thing. There are very many areas of cybersecurity that rely on like OSINT skills and research skills. And, maybe your experience with research comes from like something in your post-secondary education, and even if it's like totally unrelated to the work that you're doing now, having those skills and having developed those skills in, say, like college or university or wherever, can really help the work that you're doing in the present day. Or maybe you're like good OSINT skills, or because you're the friend that would like background check your friend's dates from Bumble before they like went out on a Friday night. Like, it sounds strange, but sometimes those real life skills that you never really think are going to apply to your everyday work can come in very, very handy. And especially in the case where you're trying to paint a full picture of a particular story, having access to those skills and being able to kind of like pull that in to paint a full picture can be really helpful. And then finally, communication and report writing. Again, I think in most areas of cybersecurity, it's really important that you can effectively communicate your findings, your work, your results. For us, we put out reports, either public blogs or just reports that go to our customers directly that are not public. These can sometimes be like 50 pages long, and we have to effectively communicate what we found, how we found it, what our assessment is of the threat actor and the threats, how confident we are, why we're confident, why we're not confident. All of this has to be communicated clearly to the customers so that they can use that intelligence in whatever way they are going to and have an understanding of what we know. And I think that this is true for most disciplines, being able to communicate to your peers, to your manager, even if it's something that's not public or like formally written down in a document that is going to be distributed to other teams, is really important. So being able to draw from those communication skills, whether it's like, totally unrelated work, working in sales, working as a server somewhere, being able to communicate with people and effectively share your thoughts and your understanding of a particular issue is really, really important. So, in threat intelligence, and like I've said now 1,000 times, most areas of cybersecurity, having a diverse skill set is a really strong asset. For those of you who are looking at getting into this industry or transitioning within the industry to a different discipline, I really want you to take away from this that even if you feel like you're quote unquote lacking certain skills in one area, even if it's in that like technical area, that engineering area, that should hopefully not dissuade you from still going after the role or the work that you're interested in. The other experiences and the knowledge that you have really are an asset to the work that you will be doing. And I fully believe that that's true for like the vast majority of disciplines in this industry. So don't undervalue the skills that you have that seem unrelated to you. I'm almost positive that they will be applicable to your work in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, I want you to think about whether you're already using skills from past experiences to help you in your current role. And if not, are there areas that you can actually incorporate into the work that you're doing to help your work, to bolster whatever reporting that you're doing, or just your work in general in the future. So I hope that you come away from this thinking about that and finding kind of creative ways to apply your interests and some of your like past life skills to the work that you're doing, and confidence to get into a different area of the industry that you might be interested in, even if you feel like maybe some of the checklist isn't fully checked off. So thank you so much for attending. I'll share these slides over Slack, and I hope you have a great rest of Day of Security. Thanks, everyone.